What in the world is going on in Alaska, looking specifically at the big markets that really drive the inventory and the housing real estate market up here in Alaska? Well, in this video, we're going to take a deep dive and kind of take a look and see what's going on the residential markets, looking at Anchorage, the MatSu Valley, Fairbanks, and the Kenai Peninsula. Before we get started though, my name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family. And before we get started, do make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's market update, looking first at Anchorage. The first thing that we need to look at for residential property in Anchorage is going to be the inventory. And it's, as anyone can tell you who's been actually busy trying to buy properties lately, it's not a whole lot of options out there. There were about 312 properties this time last year, and everyone was saying, that was pretty low. Well, now we're at 208. And that's about a third or even a quarter compared to what we've been in previous years. So yes, inventory is low in Anchorage. The next thing we need to look at for properties that are in Anchorage is that there were about 282 homes that sold this time last year. Now there's 234. So we're kind of seeing that point where we've gone over a certain threshold where we can't keep having record number of properties sell every year if the inventory gets so low. So yes, inventory has gone down. It's crossed that threshold, and the number of overall properties that are selling is starting to go down. The next thing we need to look at is that the average sold price compared to this time last year has gone up by about $11,000. And it's $11,000 sounds like a lot, because it is. But year to date, it's gone up about 2.5%. This time last year, it was about 6.9%. So that kind of gives you an idea that the market's not necessarily slowing down, but the rate at which it's increasing is starting to slow down a little bit. I suspect that we're probably, this is probably going to keep going up, but we'll save that for the summary. Switching gears a little bit, let's go and take a look at the MatSu Valley. This is actually a little ray of sunshine for those of you who've been watching the inventory in the MatSu Valley, because it's actually increased for the first time in a long, long while, because it's went from about 242 properties to about 284 properties. Not a whole lot. Not going to shift the market in any way, shape, or form, but that is kind of a good sign that the market is hopefully starting to catch up a little bit. I think it's probably a little premature to say that. That might just be the seasonal bumping up just as people are getting ready to put their homes onto the market. But that's still a favorable indicator. The next thing that stands out to me is that the number of properties that sold this time last year was 165. This year it's 180. So keep in mind what I said about that threshold. Once you cross that threshold of having not a whole lot of inventory available, once you decrease by a certain amount, you just can't keep going up. It doesn't look like the MatSu Valley's quite hit that point yet, because we had actually an increase in the number of properties that have overall sold. So that's favorable for the MatSu Valley. Last but not least, let's talk about the average sold price. So this went from about $348,000 this time last year to about $370,000 this time last year. So there's been much more dramatic increases in average sold price in the MatSu Valley. And you can go ahead and look and see what this time last year, I think they were up about 15% from where they were the year before. We're not nearly as hot this time this year, but we're still increasing on what we did the year before. So the rate at which it's increasing might not be as much, but it's still increasing. As you can see, going from 348 to 370, that's a pretty big jump to do for the same year to date. Let's take a break here real quick. For those of you who've been watching for a while, you do know that I host a podcast in addition to being the host of the Alaska Realtor YouTube channel. So do make sure you go check that out. It's called Alaskan Journey, and I talk about real estate. I talk about what it's like moving up here, what the authentic experience is like living up here from people who really already live here and have lived here for years. So certainly feel free to go take a listen to that. And let's go ahead and finish today's market update. Now, looking at the Kenai Peninsula, we saw this time last year, there's 182 properties that were available on the market. Now it's 142. So starting to see that familiar story with the kind of a decrease in inventory playing out on the Kenai Peninsula. The next thing we need to look at is that the number of properties that sold this time last year was 90, and this year it's 60. So seeing a bit of a decrease in the number of properties that are actually selling in the Kenai Peninsula. We'll see if that continues, but yeah, it's going to be kind of to be expected though. The next thing that we're seeing is average sold price went from about $311,000 this time last year to about $332,000 this year. So pretty sizable increase. Again, double digits was the average year-to-date increase this time last year for the percentage. Not seeing quite that, but still seeing a pretty aggressive percentage in the Kenai Peninsula. Next, let's go and switch gears and look at Fairbanks. So this time last year, there we go. Their number of properties available on the market was about 33, and now it's 32. So not seeing a whole lot of change there. That is a catastrophic drop from where it was before. That's barely a fraction of what the inventory was in previous years. But yes, around 30 is where we're sitting right now for Fairbanks. Now, the next thing that we're seeing is that the number of transactions actually closed went from about 19 to 13. So not a huge, this is a small sample size, but yes, coming down in Fairbanks, kind of what we would expect. Like I said, you get past that threshold and that's going to happen. Last but not least, we see the average sold price went from about $286,000 this time last year to about $310,000 this time this year. So we are seeing a pretty aggressive appreciation going on down in Fairbanks as well. So summarizing all of this, the trend across the board, with the exception of the MatSu Valley, and I'll talk about that in a second, the trend across the board, inventory is down and the average sold price is going up. That's exactly what we would expect in a market that is operating off of the free market capitalism. There's going to be less supply. There is increased demand. Just because interest rates have been so low for a while. I know a lot of people thought that interest rates going up was really going to be putting a damper on things, and that would create this big shift in the market overnight. That's not realistic. Unless suddenly we're doing double-digit interest rates, I really don't see this slowing down anytime soon. I know that's kind of counter to a lot of the headlines you're probably going to be seeing in a little bit here, and that's just because those headlines definitely do get a lot more views because that's kind of what people want to hear. Believe me, I am sick of this market that we're in for a lot of reasons, and yes, I don't like seeing prices just shooting out through the roof like that, but we have to reel it back a little bit, put it into perspective, and really just knuckle down and figure out what it is that we can do if you're a buyer to make this work. If you're a seller, I mean, you've got everything right now. It's great. But the only problem for you is if you're a seller, where are you going to go after you've sold your property? If it's secondary property, you are king of the hill right now because there is your bill to get top dollar for your property, and you're not going to have to solve the problem of how to buy in this market. For those of you who are needing to buy in this market, believe me, I feel for you. There's multiple properties I've been making offers on lately that I got beat out on. And I mean, I'm the realtor. I know all this stuff inside and out, and I still didn't get the property. So yes, I know I can throw a lot of numbers around, but I do know that there are, in fact, real people with real lives dealing with real emotions as they're going through all this. And I really wish it would settle down a little bit. Unfortunately, I just don't see that being the case anytime soon. The best thing you can do is not to wait if you're a buyer. Okay, if you're a buyer, this is probably only going to get worse. Okay, I don't understand why people are saying prices are going to drop. If inflation is more of an issue, why would prices go down? Okay, that makes absolutely no sense. The other thing that I'm seeing as well, I'm probably going to make an entire video specifically on this, but the other thing you also have to take in mind, a lot of people are looking back to 2008, 2009. The markets could not be any more different now versus then. Okay, back then, we went into that tailspin because there was too much inventory on the market. You had about 12 months worth of inventory on the market at a time, and we've got like 1 month's worth of market now to give you perspective. And builders were still building back then, and there were such bad lending practices that people who could not afford those properties were going in and buying stuff for zero down were just completely upside down once the market turned. So the lending practices have been really, really clamped down and made a lot better. Since then, the inventory is not nearly as high as it was then, and I'm just not seeing this changing anytime soon. Additionally, the people who've been buying the past couple of years, usually people are wanting to sell their properties in about 3 to 4 years. The people who've bought the past couple of years, they're not going to be selling anytime soon. Okay, so looking forward, where normally those people would be selling around this time, they're probably not going anywhere. So inventory shortage is probably just going to get worse. And I know that's not what you want to hear, and you just want to hear there's going to be this big collapse and everyone's going to be able to get big discounts, but it's not really realistic, and it's not what we're seeing in the numbers. So sorry, wish I could say otherwise, but that is just what I'm seeing in the numbers, and I'm going to shoot straight with you. So if you are looking at buying, we can still make this work. Feel free to reach out to me. Let's chat a little bit. The worst thing you can do right now is to wait and think that this is going to get better. It is not. If you're a seller, let's go and talk a little bit and see if this makes sense for you to sell right now. Just because the market's up doesn't necessarily mean it's a good time for you personally to sell. But either way, I'd be happy to have that conversation. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk. If this has been useful, make sure you do get this video a like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.